My name is Sophia Bennett. For 7 years. I believed I knew my husband. His favorite coffee. His favorite shirt. The way he liked his eggs cooked. The little sound he made when he was nervous. I knew everything about him. Or at least, I thought I did. My husband, Mark Bennett, and I lived in a beautiful apartment outside New York City. It wasn't a mansion, but it was comfortable. We had a nice kitchen, a small balcony, a mortgage we could afford, and a life I had worked incredibly hard to build. I was a senior financial analyst at a large investment company. Mark worked in corporate sales. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. At least, that was what I believed. Because almost everything we owned was paid for with my salary. I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities. I paid for our vacations. And when Mark lost his job 2 years earlier, I supported him. For 11 months. I never complained. I never asked him when he was going to find work. I never made him feel ashamed. Every night, I told him, "We're a team." And he always said, "I know." I believed him. That was my first mistake. The day everything changed started like any other. I woke up at 6:15, made coffee, packed my lunch, kissed Mark goodbye. He barely looked up from his phone. "Have a good day." "You too." I left. At 9:30, my manager asked me to come to his office. His door was closed. 3 people were sitting inside. Human resources, my manager, and the regional director. I immediately knew something was wrong. "Sophia, please sit." I sat. My manager looked uncomfortable. "I'm afraid we have some difficult news." He pushed a folder toward me. I opened it. "Your position has been eliminated." I stared at the page. "Why?" "Corporate restructuring." "But my performance." "Your performance has been excellent." "Then why me?" He looked away. "The department is being reduced." I sat there silently. 7 years. 7 years of late nights. Weekend reports. Missed birthdays. Cancelled vacations. And suddenly, I was unemployed. I drove home without turning on the radio. I kept thinking about Mark. How would I tell him? Would he comfort me? Would he hug me? Would he tell me everything would be okay? I imagined him saying, "Don't worry, Sophia. We'll get through this together." I believed he would say it. When I opened the apartment door, Mark was sitting on the couch. He looked at me. "You're home early." I dropped my purse. "We need to talk." He immediately looked worried. "What happened?" "I lost my job." He stared at me. "What?" "The company laid me off." He didn't move. Then, he laughed. I thought he was nervous. But he wasn't. He was amused. "You lost your job?" "Yes." "After 7 years." "Mark, I didn't choose this." He stood. "You were supposed to be the stable one." I felt something inside me tighten. "What does that mean?" He shook his head. "Nothing." "No. Forget it." "Say what you mean." He looked directly at me. "Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to be useless." I couldn't breathe. "What did you say?" "You heard me." I stared at the man I had loved for 7 years. "I supported you for 11 months. That's different." "How?" "Because I was trying to build something. And I wasn't." He shrugged. Then came the sentence I would remember forever. "A woman who can't provide isn't much of a wife." I walked away. I locked myself in the bedroom. And cried. Not because I had lost my job. Because I had finally lost the illusion that my husband loved me. The next morning, Mark left without saying goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started looking for work. Then an email appeared. From Carter and Associates. Subject: Confidential. Bennett Family Trust. I almost deleted it. But my last name was Bennett. I opened it. "Ms. Sophia Bennett, according to the final instructions of your late grandmother, you are required to contact our office immediately. My heart started racing. My grandmother had died 12 years earlier. She had never mentioned a trust. I called. A man answered. Ms. Bennett. Yes. My name is David Carter. Why are you contacting me? I need you to come to my office. Why? There was a long pause. Because your grandmother left you something. What? Everything. I went to his office that afternoon. David placed a thick leather folder on the table. Your grandmother established a private investment trust. I stared at him. How much? He opened the first document. $42 million in liquid assets. My mouth went dry. What? He opened another. And controlling ownership in Bennett Holdings. What is Bennett Holdings? He looked at me. Your family's private investment company. I laughed nervously. My family doesn't own an investment company. Your grandmother did. He slid a document toward me. Bennett Holdings, 62% controlling ownership. I stared at the percentage. How much is the company worth? David answered. Approximately $190 million. I couldn't speak. My grandmother had left me control of a $190 million company. And my husband had called me useless because I lost a job. But David wasn't finished. There's a condition. What? Your grandmother instructed us not to reveal your inheritance to your husband until you had complete control. Why? He opened another file. Inside was a photograph of Mark. I froze. Why do you have a photograph of my husband? David looked serious. Your grandmother investigated him. Why? She believed he might eventually try to gain access to your inheritance. I shook my head. That's impossible. David handed me a handwritten note. My grandmother's handwriting. If Mark Bennett ever learns about Sophia's inheritance, she must protect herself immediately. I stared at the words. Then my phone rang. Mark. I answered. Where are you? At a meeting. With who? Why? I received an email from your company. I froze. My company? Yes. What did it say? He laughed. Apparently, you're being offered a position. What position? His voice became quieter. CEO. I returned home that evening. Mark was waiting. He looked unusually excited. I think your company wants you back. I looked at him. What makes you think that? The email. What did it say? Something about an executive appointment. I smiled. He had no idea. Maybe. He stepped closer. Sophia, this could be good for us. For us? Of course. Interesting. Yesterday I was useless. Today, suddenly my career mattered. Why are you so interested? He laughed. Because you're my wife. I looked at him. You didn't seem very interested yesterday. His smile disappeared. You're still upset. I'm thinking. About what? About us. He sighed. Don't make this dramatic. I almost laughed. You called me useless. I was angry. You meant it. No, you did. He walked away. The next morning, David called. Ms. Bennett, the board meeting is tomorrow. What board meeting? The company board. I thought I wasn't officially CEO yet. You aren't. Then why am I attending? Because the current CEO is resigning. Why? David paused. Because he knows the company is about to change hands. I arrived at Bennett Holdings headquarters the next morning. It was a 40-story glass building in Manhattan. I had walked past it hundreds of times. I never knew my grandmother owned it. Executives were waiting in the lobby. The moment I walked in, everyone became quiet. The chairman approached me. Ms. Bennett. Yes. He smiled. Welcome home. I entered the boardroom. There were 12 executives. And one familiar face. Mark. I stopped. He looked at me. His expression changed. Sophia. I looked at David. Why is he here? David answered. Mark is a senior executive at one of Bennett Holdings' subsidiaries. I turned toward my husband. He looked terrified. You work here? I didn't know. Didn't know what? He couldn't answer. The chairman stood. Ladies and gentlemen. He looked at me. Allow me to introduce Sophia Bennett. He paused. The majority shareholder and new controlling owner of Bennett Holdings. Silence. Mark stared at me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I sat down. Let's begin. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I discovered problems everywhere. Executives had been receiving huge bonuses. Contracts had been approved without proper review. Millions had been moved between subsidiaries. And one executive had been approving payments to companies owned by relatives. I stopped the meeting. Who authorized these? Everyone looked at each other. Then the CFO spoke. The previous board. Names. He hesitated. Charles Bennett. My uncle. Yes. I looked at David. Does my uncle still control anything? No. Remove his access. After the meeting, Mark followed me. Sophia. I kept walking. Please wait. I stopped. He looked nervous. You own this company? Yes. How? My grandmother. You knew. I found out yesterday. He stared at me. Why didn't you tell me? I smiled. Why would I? Because I'm your husband. I looked at him. You told me I was useless. I was wrong. You said a woman who can't provide isn't much of a wife. I was angry. You meant it. He looked down, then whispered. I didn't know you were rich. I stared at him. Exactly. That night, Mark came home. He didn't apologize. Instead, he asked, how much do you own? I laughed. That's your first question. I'm just curious. No. He became defensive. I'm your husband. And you're suddenly very interested in my finances. He said nothing. Then his phone rang. He walked into another room. I followed quietly. I heard him say, she knows. A man's voice came through the phone. I couldn't hear the response. Mark whispered, we need to change the plan. My blood went cold. Plan? What plan? I stepped away before he saw me. Later that night, I called David. I need a background investigation on my husband. He didn't ask why. Understood. And David? Yes. I want everything. 3 days later, David returned with a file. I opened it. Mark had debts. Huge debts. Credit card debt. Private loans. Gambling losses. And then, $3.2 million owed to a private lender. I stared at the number. Who lent him this money? David looked at me. Your uncle. My stomach dropped. My uncle had been financing my husband. And Mark had been hiding it from me. But there was more. A second document showed Mark had signed an agreement. If he couldn't repay the money, he would help transfer control of Bennett Holdings. I looked at David. Can he do that? No. Why? Because your grandmother's trust prevents any transfer without your approval. I smiled. So that's the plan. Mark hadn't married me for love. He had married me because he thought I would eventually inherit the company. And now, he was trying to steal it. I didn't confront Mark immediately. Instead, I hired the best forensic accountants in New York. They discovered something worse. Mark wasn't simply in debt. He had been secretly transferring money from our joint accounts. Over $300,000. I found hotel receipts, private dinners, luxury gifts, and then, photographs. Mark had been seeing another woman. Her name was Jessica Lane. She was the daughter of a wealthy investor. I confronted him. Who is Jessica? His face changed. She's a colleague. Don't lie. Silence. How long? He looked away. 6 months. 6 months. While I was working. While I was supporting him. While he was calling me useless. I nodded. Okay. He looked surprised. That's it. No. I took a folder from my bag. These are divorce papers. His face went white. Sophia. I'm done. You can't do this. I can. You need me. I smiled. No, Mark. You needed my money. He begged. Then he threatened. Then he apologized. Then he cried. I felt nothing. Because I had already mourned our marriage. Months ago. The divorce became ugly. Mark demanded half of everything. My lawyers laughed. Your grandmother's trust is separate property. He demanded the apartment. It was purchased with my inheritance. He demanded my company. Impossible. Then he claimed he had sacrificed his career for me. The judge asked, do you have evidence? Mark had none. I had everything. Bank statements. Messages. Contracts. Audio recordings. And the agreement with my uncle. The judge ruled against him. Mark received almost nothing. But my uncle wasn't finished. He called me. You think you've won. I know I have. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Explain. He laughed. Your grandmother didn't leave you that company because she loved you. I froze. What? She left it because your father destroyed everything. What are you talking about? Ask David. I called David. He sounded serious. Ms. Bennett, there's something I haven't told you. What? Your grandmother's trust has one final file. What file? Your father's death investigation. I froze. My father had died when I was 18. Everyone said it was a heart attack. David continued. Your grandmother believed he was murdered. I couldn't breathe. By whom? We don't know. But she suspected someone. Yes. Who? David hesitated. Your Uncle Charles. I opened the file. There were medical records, financial records, old photographs, and one letter. My grandmother had written. I know what Charles did. I know he was responsible for the company's collapse. I know he had a reason to silence my son. My hands trembled. Then I found another document. A life insurance policy. My father had secretly insured himself for $8 million. Beneficiary. My grandmother. But after his death, the beneficiary had been changed. To Charles. The signature was forged. Everything was connected. Then I found something shocking. A handwritten note from my father. It said, if anything happens to me, watch Mark. I stared at the page. Why Mark? My husband hadn't even been in my life when my father died. Or so I thought. I called my mother. Then remembered. My mother had died years earlier. There was nobody left to ask. Except my uncle. I went to see Charles. He was waiting. You finally found it. What did you do to my father? He smiled. Nothing. You forged his insurance policy. Prove it. You financed my husband. So? You wanted control of my inheritance. He stood. You were never supposed to know about the trust. Why? Because your grandmother knew what your father did. What did he do? Charles laughed. Ask yourself why your father was investigating me. I stared at him. What does that mean? He leaned closer. Your father wasn't the victim. I froze. Then who was? He smiled. Your grandmother. I left my uncle's office completely confused. My grandmother. What had happened to her? I returned to David. Tell me everything. He opened the final file. My grandmother wasn't simply wealthy. I know. She built Bennett Holdings herself. What? Your grandfather died when your father was young. My grandmother took control. Yes. Then why did my father inherit? He didn't. I froze. What? Your grandmother never trusted your father with the company. Then why did she leave it to me? David looked at me. Because you were the only person she believed would never become like him. My heart broke. What did my father do? David placed several documents on the table. My father had been secretly borrowing company money. He had created fake subsidiaries. He had accumulated millions in hidden debt. My uncle had discovered it. But instead of exposing him, they made a deal. My father would keep his position. Charles would receive part of the profits. And my grandmother would never know. Until she discovered the truth. My grandmother confronted my father. He begged her for forgiveness. She refused. Then she changed her will. She removed him from control. And placed the company in a trust. My trust. But my father was furious. He threatened to expose Charles. Charles threatened him back. Then, my father died. I sat in silence. Who killed him? David shook his head. We still don't know. Then what about the note saying to watch Mark? David looked at another page. That's the part we couldn't explain. I stared at it. Then suddenly, I remembered something. The day I met Mark. He had told me his father was a businessman. His father's name. Charles Bennett. My uncle. My entire marriage had been connected to my family from the beginning. Mark wasn't random. He had been placed in my life. I called Mark. We need to talk. He arrived. I put the documents on the table. He looked at them. Then closed his eyes. You know. Yes. He sat down. How much? Everything. He started crying. Your uncle found me when I was 24. What did he want? You. I froze. He told me about the trust. And he told me to marry you. My hands became cold. You married me because of my inheritance. Yes. Did you ever love me? He looked at me. I did. When? At first. I laughed bitterly. At first. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. But you did. He nodded. Then why did you betray me? Because Charles threatened me. With what? My sister. I stared at him. Your sister. He had evidence against her. Mark looked broken. I was trapped. I shook my head. You still chose to hurt me. He nodded. I know. I had everything I needed. But I wanted one final thing. Justice. I contacted federal investigators. We gave them every document. The recordings. The financial transfers. The forged agreements. The conspiracy. The investigation lasted months. Then, Charles was arrested. The charges included fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and financial crimes. Mark cooperated. He gave investigators the information they needed. He lost his career, his reputation, his marriage, everything. But I didn't destroy him. His choices did. A year later, Bennett Holdings was stronger than ever. The company expanded. Its value increased. And I became its official CEO. But I didn't become the cold, arrogant woman everyone expected. I remembered what it felt like to be told I was useless. So I created a foundation. The Sophia Bennett Women's Opportunity Fund. We helped women who had lost their jobs. Women leaving abusive marriages. Women rebuilding after financial betrayal. Women who had been told they were worthless. The first year, we helped more than 1,000 women. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Mark. He was living in another state. Working a normal job. No luxury apartment. No expensive cars. No wealthy family protecting him. Just Mark. The letter said, Sophia. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I finally understand something. You were never useless. I was. I read the letter twice, then put it away. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him. Because I had nothing left to say. Months later, I stood in the Bennett Holdings boardroom. The same room where Mark had once looked at me like I was nobody. My executives were gathered around the table. One of them asked, "Ms. Bennett, should we approve the acquisition?" I looked at the documents. Yes. The meeting continued. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned whether I belonged there. Because I had earned my place. That evening, I drove to my grandmother's old house. The house had been empty for years. I walked into her bedroom. Her photograph was still on the dresser. I sat beside it. I understand now. I whispered. You didn't leave me money. You left me a chance. A chance to build something. A chance to protect myself. A chance to become the woman you believed I could be. I smiled through tears. Thank you. I thought about the day Mark had called me useless. I remembered sitting alone in that bedroom, crying, thinking my life was over. But that day wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Losing my job led me to the trust. The trust exposed my husband. My husband exposed my uncle. My uncle exposed the family secrets. And those secrets finally revealed the truth my grandmother had spent years protecting. Sometimes, life destroys the version of you that was never meant to survive. And sometimes, the person who humiliates you becomes the reason you discover your own power. 2 years later, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference. Thousands of people filled the room. I walked onto the stage. The host introduced me. Sophia Bennett, CEO of Bennett Holdings. The audience applauded. I looked out at them, then said, 2 years ago, I lost my job. The room became quiet. My husband looked at me and called me useless. Some people gasped. I smiled. I believed him for one night. Then I paused. Only one night. The audience laughed. I continued. Because the next morning, I discovered my grandmother had left me a company. Not because I was lucky. Because she believed I could protect it. I looked at the audience. Never let someone else's opinion become your identity. Someone can call you worthless and still be completely wrong. The audience stood. Applause filled the room. I smiled. Not because I had become rich. Not because my husband had lost everything. Not because my uncle was in prison. But because I finally understood the truth. My worth had never depended on my job. My worth had never depended on my husband. And my worth had never depended on money. I had been valuable before I inherited a fortune. I had been strong before I became a CEO. And I had been enough. Even when nobody else could see it. I walked off the stage. My assistant met me backstage. That was incredible. I smiled. Thank you. She handed me a message. I opened it. It was from a young woman who had attended the speech. She wrote, I was about to give up. Then I heard you. Thank you for reminding me that losing everything doesn't mean you're worthless. I stared at the message, and tears filled my eyes, because suddenly, I realized my grandmother's greatest inheritance wasn't the $42 million. It wasn't the company. It wasn't the buildings. It wasn't the investments. It was the strength to stand up after being knocked down. And that was worth more than everything.